Hey, thanks for coming out. My name's Andrew Pierce. I'm a solutions engineer over at Redgate, and today I'm going to be talking a bit about, well, the name, busting database build blockers, and some of the tech debt that I see when I'm helping customers getting started with automation. I've done a lot of implementations across a lot of companies, and it can be very easy, or it can be extraordinarily challenging. And it really comes down to the existing landscape. What is already in those databases? What kind of tech debt exists in there? What's kind of the migration forward? How is the database changing? How do you want to use automation to change it going forward? And what are kind of the development practices that are currently in place? So we'll talk a little bit about the things that stop, the things that block you from getting automated in the first place, and then how to address those concerns, mainly with Redgate solutions, and really how we can detect those invalid objects and help you resolve those issues across environments. So the first thing that I wanted to do for my presentation was actually take advantage of the SQL Prompt AI feature to give me some invalid objects. So you guys are probably familiar with invalid objects. In this case, I had the SQL Prompt AI create this table for me. I said, here's I'll show you the notepad right here where I pasted in my prompt, create a users table with a Twitter ID column on there, create a stored procedure in a view that uses that Twitter column and a few other columns, and then SP rename that Twitter column to X ID because Twitter renamed to X, right? And that's, it's a silly example, but these types of changes happen. Things need to be renamed, refactoring goes on, and we have dependencies that are left in place after that refactoring has occurred. Maybe it's because we're not using those procedures or what have you anymore. And so this script, I had to be very specific. I had to tell it to put go statements in between it. We'll get there. But you can see it created a stored procedure over in view that used some of those columns in here. And then at the bottom, it renames my Twitter ID to X ID right here. And let me just take this from this environment over to my demo environment here. So I'm just going to do a quick copy paste here. Okay. And let's open up SSMS, and let's open up Flyway here. And just to go back to SSMS here, a really quick way that we can find these issues is to right-click. So if you have SQL Prompt installed, if you're already a SQL Prompt customer, this is a fantastic thing that a lot of people aren't familiar with. We have this find invalid objects right here. And so that will go through my whole database, and we don't detect the invalid objects, we just try to run them inside of SQL Server. So if we find an invalid object, it's because SQL Server found that and said this procedure doesn't work. Not us per se, so we don't have our own engine that's doing it. So I'm gonna just right-click right there, find invalid objects. There we go. So there's my stored procedure. It sees the Twitter ID that doesn't exist. Invalid column name Twitter ID right there. Yeah, it was renamed, right? And so that's a really quick way to be able to find invalid objects, some of that, a little bit of tech debt across environments and consolidate it. So I'm going to take that script, and I actually want to run that in my, I'm going to go run that in my quote unquote production environment over here in New World DB. Here we go. Cool. And you'll notice when I open up a new query window here, this marks as purple. I can actually change that tab color to production here. So SQL Prompt is kind of a whole Swiss Army knife of things for code analysis, code formatting. So I can do Control KY and it can reformat my code here. into whatever format I want. So it's quite configurable. It's really good for productivity. So if that's something that could be helpful, it can definitely save your life there. And in this case, it's red telling me that this is production right here. So if I run this in production and I really shouldn't, then this could save my life. But I'm going to do it anyways because this is a demo, right? And SSMS is telling me, yeah, that could break some scripts. Yes, that's the point of this. And now inside of Flyway, so this is where we're going to, I help customers. I say, oh, let's start a new project, right? Let's get started. Let's do your database into version control. Let's do that. Let's walk through creating a new project. What's going to happen if we have these invalid objects in this downstream environment here when we're trying to get started? So I'm going to go, over here, and we'll actually, I'm going to go over to an existing project over here. And I'm going to do a little bit of under the hood fun stuff here. Here we go. So first of all, inside of my project, I already imported my development database in here into version control. So we set it up with my connection string to dev. It imported all that fun stuff into my project here, into the schema model. So we can see that all right here. My store procedures, my tables, whatnot in here. And when I go over to migrations over here, I already have a bunch of scripts, but we're going to pretend like we're doing a new project. So I'm going to just take all of these, and I'm just going to get rid of all of these here. There we go. We're going to start from scratch. Oh, that didn't, I did backspace instead of delete there. There we go. Yes, now it's empty. Cool. And then when I go over to generate migrations here, it's going to ask us for a production-like schema right here. So I need to import production into version control. I just imported dev into version control. That's one of the first things. It's not going to complain about invalid objects there. It's just going to say, oh yeah, okay, we're going to put that into disk. What's going to happen here though, we're going to pull that production schema and then we're going to run that against the live database. And if there are invalid objects in there, we're going to find them really quick, right? It says you haven't created a baseline yet. So that baseline is off of production so that when we're deploying to downstream environments, we don't have to compare directly to production. We don't want to give anyone access to production. Rather, we'll pull production to us, pull that into version control, let the developers compare against that model of production in there so that we don't have to, give them access to those downstream environments. But we're still confident it's going to generate a script that's valid when we finally get to production. So I'm going to click Create Baseline right here. And I just need to give it a target database right here. So yeah, here we go. Let's make sure my New World DB right there. Actually, let's go off of an existing one here. Test, and then let's edit it. There we go. Okay. New World DB right there. Cool. We'll give that an ID of prod and cool. So we'll test and save there. And this isn't going to do anything to my target environment at this point. We're really just exporting the schema from it. And then in here too, I can pull out any reference data if I want to include that and adjust my comparison options. This is using our SQL compare engine under the hood. So we're comparing schema to schema. And in this case, we have some configuration data we're pulling in too from production. And that's an important note as well. With this data that we're pulling in, we base it on the IDs when we do the data comparison. So our IDs actually need to be in sync across environments. If we're going to script out an update statement, we're going to update based off of that comparison key, that supplier ID in this case. And so our configuration data needs to be in sync if you want us to generate it. You're welcome to script it out yourself manually if you want to handle it that way, and that's fine. But just if you want to take advantage of our data comparison, we need to do that. And of course, here's my options from there. So I'm going to click Create Baseline right here. And right now, it came out for just a second, but it said checking for invalid objects. This is something new that we've actually added to our comparison engine, where it's aware of invalid objects inside of the database, because this is something we've been seeing with a lot of customers. It'll, let's see, I'm a little surprised it didn't, yeah. Apparently it didn't find any invalid objects, but let's double check in here to see if we have it. And you can see we've got find and replace right here if we want to search through our script and find it. So let's go find our Twitter ID right here. Okay, there's our Twitter ID. So there's Twitter ID. And then let's see XID. Okay. So when we actually try to run this, it's going to create that table users right here. And then it's going to create our store procedure right here that uses Twitter ID. And so I don't need to tell you this, but this is going to fail when we actually try to run this script, because it's got the XID right here that it's creating in the table definition, but it's still referencing my Twitter ID right here. So I'm going to click Save right here. And then the first thing it's going to try to do is run this against a live database that we've already specified as part of our project. You just give it an empty database. Say, hey, have fun with it. Validate our scripts against this empty database. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click Verify Generated Migrations right here. And then it's going to deploy all of my scripts to that one database right there. There we go. So here we go. So you can see, here's my create procedure right there. It erred on that exactly. So yeah, it failed. So we have to go in, we have to fix the script before we can actually begin to build. And this is something I see with a lot of customers. It's a build blocker in this case. We can't build until this script is valid. The nice thing is we saw the script really runs as written in here. So if we want to fix it and we don't actually want to change that in production right now, then we can actually do that. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code actually in here. And let's just use that as a code editor. Here we go, actually. We'll just do right here. Cool. And let's fix it ourselves, because sometimes that's what it takes, right? So I'm going to just do a Control F in here. We'll do our okay. And then let's do find replace XID right there. Cool. Yep. There we go. There we go. So I just fixed everything now. My views, my store procedures are using that new column name. And let's go back to Flyway Desktop here. And let's do a clean and retry in here. And so this will actually, the empty database that we gave it, it's going to clean it out. It's going to drop everything in it. So of course you don't want to give it a database that you care about, just an empty database here. And then it's going to retry running the script against it that we just edited. And so hopefully this succeeds. And we'll be able to see, there we go. Cool. So it successfully migrated database, we call it the shadow database there, to version 1.0, one migration executed there. Cool. Now, these changes that I had in production here, I didn't deploy them against my dev environment. I didn't sync up dev. These were things that were made hotfix to production. And so the first thing we see in here is a bunch of drops. It wants to drop my users table. How dare it? You know, it's going to drop all of my users in this case, as well as the stored procedure and the views that existed in production. So if I need to sync up dev with the changes that were made in production, I don't want to do it this way. I don't want to drop them. I actually want to go in the opposite direction. So let's be a little bit more careful with that. I'm going to go over to our SQL compare in here. And so in SSMS, I'm going to just compare. This is the empty database that we pointed it at, this New World DB shadow. It's, shadow database is just a real database there. And I fixed the script already that ran against it. So this has some valid, this has all my valid objects. So I'm going to set this as the source right here of my comparison. And then I want to sync up dev, my dev database, with that. So I set my the empty database where we deployed all those valid scripts to. And now I'm going to drag and drop my New World DB dev over here as my target database. And so SQL Compare is a really powerful tool for helping us to sync environments up. You know, if test is different than production, if different customers have different production environments, and we deployed one to one customer, and we didn't do that to the other customer, and vice versa, well, we're all out in different versions. And so SQL Compare can help you get on a standardized version so that when you're running a script across all your environments, you're confident when you take that forward, it's going to work, and that you're not going to overwrite some sort of customization you made to this particular customer. Now, we can find that as part of the pipeline too, which is pretty cool. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. You can see on the left-hand side, I have my shadow right there, just the connection string for that. I need to add trust server certificate in here, just because I'm a very trusting person. And then let's compare now. Yeah, so that's a SQL Server. So he's asking about the encryption option. That's the SQL Server encrypted connection string. So yeah, yep. No. So what SQL Compare is really doing is it's establishing two different connections to two different servers, and it's pulling it all into the middle, into the file system locally here. So it's not connecting those together with each other. It's connecting it with it. So this one machine that I'm on, they don't need to be able to connect to each other. I just need to be able to connect to both of them in this case. And even then, I'm connecting database to database. I can also pull out what we call a snapshot, so I can export the schema to a single file. It's not like a database snapshot in SQL Server where that has data in it. This is just schema only. And then export to that to the network that has access to that other database, and then compare that directly. So that can be really useful for customer clients that are on different networks, and to be able to take that, this is our golden schema right here, export it over here. Let's compare. These are the differences. We can also just give us a report right here. So up in tools, I can generate the comparison results report right here. Here we go. Okay, generate. And I can see all the differences. So I can see, my new users table right here. That's what's going to be created in my dev environment. My store procedure right there, as well as my my view over here with that new XID, right? And so that can be really useful just to get a report. What exists out there? What's going to be added, created, what's going to be modified, some other things that maybe we weren't aware of. It looks like we have no check on in this environment, and so it's seeing that as well. We could ignore that if we want, if we don't care about no check, for example. So it can be as detailed as you want with there. And one other cool thing is that we can exclude specific objects. So on the left-hand side, if we don't care about like the differences in roles or users over here, we can exclude those from the comparison, so that we only are syncing up the objects that we're developing on, so that we can really tailor that across our environments. And we can even add that to our automation project, so that when we're generating scripts, we're not generating scripts for permissions or users or anything else that we don't want to sync with downstream environments. In this case, I'm going to choose those changes right here. So not employees right there. I don't want to do no check or order details. I want to do these over here, my users, user profile, and there we go. Just those 3 changes, right, that we made earlier. I'll click deploy right there. It didn't deploy directly. It takes us through a few steps. I can actually back up the target right here before deploying with a full backup, or that snapshot that I was talking about, the schema in a single file as a comparison point to roll us back. Click next. It's generating the SQL. There's my user, XID with the valid XID, deploy now. Even when I click deploy now, it doesn't actually, it's going to make us go through one file. So are you really sure you want to do this? Yeah, actually deploy it right now. Cool. So we've synced up not everything, but those things that were crucial for us. And then now I can get that into version control here. And we can see right here, there's my new users table. There's my store procedure and view. And actually, when I check the checkbox right here, it's going to create these object definitions in version control. And this is exactly what it's going to look like. We really want to treat the database as code right there. So when you make a change to a table, you'll get a get diff. This is just the new column on that table. This is how this procedure has changed over time. And so you'll have that full history. This is how it's changed. And if we're working on the same procedure as someone else, we'll get a get conflict on that. And so that's something else that's a build blocker in many cases, is we need to work as a team together, because we're all going to be working on this shared Git repository. And we could override each other's changes. Git will let you do that. It'll tell you that you're doing that, but you'll see it in version control. And so we need to be aware of each other's changes, not just in the live database, but in version control. It's a new thing right here, but it will help you keep it in sync. It automatically picked up all these changes. And I can just click Save to Project right here. There we go. And then when I go to generate migrations, there's going to be no differences. Fingers crossed as soon as it's done. So this is letting me know I only have 5 minutes left here. That's I'm on time. That's good. There we go. So no changes found. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Dev is in sync with production right now. Hopefully test and the other environments are also in sync. If not, I can use SQL Compare to kind of get them all in sync. And then over here in version control, I can see those changes that I made to my users. I added that new users, store procedures, et cetera. We can see the added right there. And this is just Git. It's just a Git client right here. So you don't need to have full extensive knowledge of Git. You don't need to be advanced or know how to use command line or anything like that. We'll have the basics integration that you need to get started. That shouldn't be a blocker. But as you get more advanced, as you start working as a team, you will encounter more advanced Git scenarios. So this is a good place to get started and then learn as you go, which is a very common thing with databases, of course. So I'm going to put in a feature flag right here, feature 1, 2, 3 or whatever, and we'll say added users table and dependencies. Okay, cool. And then I can commit and then push that up to other environments there. So commit and then push. And you can see right here, I can see the branch that I'm pushing to, my development branch. We also see release, test, and others over here. So I can push those changes. In this case, that's going up to Azure DevOps, and we can see those in place here in my pipelines. Cool. So over here in my file system, we can see my migration script right there that I generated. So this one is my baseline. Because this already has all my schema in it from production, of course, we're never going to run it in production. And we have that kind of intelligence under the hood. We're going to make sure this never runs. V1, that's what's already there. V2 is everything on top of that. And so you don't have to worry about that's not going to be a build blocker. We do need it to do build validation. So every time you add a new script, it's going to validate it. So we need to keep it valid as part of our project. So that kind of continuous integration, that continuous validation of every new change that's added, hopefully makes it so that that tech debt doesn't sneak in, right? Make sure that we catch, if anything, any invalid syntax is added to our project and gets into version control before it gets to test, before it gets to any downstream environment, right? And then over in, let's see, yeah. So in my schema model here, we can see let's create my pull request right here. And let's just take a look at the files right here. So we got a bunch over there. We can see the new store procedure, just the object definition, my table object definition with the XID right there, and then my view. And of course, this isn't what's deployed. We'll script, if we add a new column, we'll script that out. That's a new migration script. That's V2 on top of my B1, alter table, add column. We're not going to recreate the whole table just for adding a new column right there. Something else that can be a build blocker, but really I think it shouldn't, is that we're really scared of automating changes out. Because as soon as you give, that's kind of like shifting left, giving developers more access, permissions to deploy to environments. And that can be scary. And maybe developers shouldn't be in charge of that. Maybe DBAs should be in charge of all of that. But in some cases, when we're trying to scale, we don't have enough DBAs. We've got 200 developers and 3 DBAs. And those are real scenarios that I've seen. You guys experience it, I'm sure. And so we need a way to enforce policy across those scripts, even when we can't look at every single thing, every single line of code that goes out, because we can't be the bottleneck to all of this. We can't, So Flyway actually has the ability to enforce code standards across the entire pipeline. So this is the Flyway installer right here. And inside of it, we have something called rules right here. So these rules are kind of some of our out-of-box rules. Here we go. So this is an alter user rule right here. If it detects alter user syntax, then it will fail. And we can have that fail the entire pipeline. So if we detect this alter user syntax, it's been added as a script, we'll fail it immediately as soon as they add it to the pipeline, kick that back to the developer, hey, you cannot do this. And if we need to customize this, like, we don't want them to say, add a user. That's as easy as creating I'm going to add a new rule right here, RX 13 right here, and we'll say, create user. There we go. .toml. There we go. Toml. Cool. So there's my new create user. I'm going to go over to my alter user, and I'm just going to reuse this right here. Control C, and then here's my create user. Paste that in, and then cool, create, boom. I've got a create user rule right there. If we want to get into the nitty gritty right here, this is our regular expression. This is just regular expression pattern matching. So if you guys are regex experts, have at it, have fun with it. If you're not, and I'm definitely not, you can take the rules that we have like I did and just tailor, I want this to detect a create user right here. Or maybe if I want this to be dialect specific, this is something for SQL Server in particular and not for everything. Text is cross database. Create a user is a user, right? Create user is pretty cross platform. But changing passwords isn't. And so we have a Postgres, T-SQL, Oracle, Snowflake. So you can detect the dialect as part of the rule and only run those dialects and then set warning levels for this. So maybe if it's a truncate, that's a warning error level. If it's a create user, that's a fail. It's an error level. And so you can define what's acceptable as part of your pipeline to make sure the syntax that you really need to desperately avoid is avoided as part of it automatically. And we'll surface all of this in the reports that we show in the pipeline. We're out of time, so I'm not going to be able to show those reports, but definitely come by the booth and I can show you the reports that we give. We can actually detect drift, environment drift. Before you go to an environment, we'll tell you, hey, this is out of sync with what's in version control. Do you care? Like, is that okay? Is that a hotfix you made to that environment? And that's okay, you still want to deploy? That's fine, we'll let you deploy. If you want to fail, if you detect any differences, any changes that have been made directly to production or test or something like that, we can do that. And so these are just flags that you can switch. And really when we deploy, we're just going to run whatever scripts you add to the folder. So you have full confidence. This script is the same that ran in test, dev, and production. And by the time it gets out to production, it should be boring. That's my job. If it's boring when you guys go out to production, I know that I've done a good job, that you guys have done the good job, because it's a lot of work getting ready, busting those database build blockers. And thanks for coming out here. I really appreciate everyone who came out. And please come up to me, come up to our booth and say hi.